It's spring again and it's time to prune my fruit trees, and normally I would prune my apricot trees last because of the possibility of late season frost, but I'm training this apricot tree right now. This will be the third year, and so a late frost isn't going to be that important because I'm not likely to get a lot of fruit, if any at all. We've had some very low temperatures this year. This one may have produced some fruit, but we had some below zero temperatures this year, and we may not have any fruit at all on things like my peaches or my apricots. It really depends. We'll have to wait and see. Now, this tree is being trained, and what we mean by training is we're developing the framework to support the fruit load that's going to come a little bit later, as opposed to our annual pruning, which we do to maintain whatever type of training system we've established for that particular tree. Also, we take out unproductive wood like diseased wood, wood in the wrong location, wood that may have been damaged in some way, or maybe it has died from a disease like fire blight on pears or something like that. So, and also we like to try to control the size somewhat on our established trees. But this tree is in its third year pruning, and first let's take a look at what happened from last year. As you can see here, the lower branches have not grown as much as the upper branches, and I would expect the higher growth, since it's up closer to the sun, to produce a little bit more growth than what I would see in the lower branches, but I was a little bit disappointed with what we saw on the lower branches. So we'll see what we do today as a result of that. Now the top of the tree, on the other hand, is looking pretty good. It's putting on very good annual growth. I have some branches up there that exceed 3 feet of one season's growth. And so we're going to have to even some things up here. And what we're going to do is start at the bottom of the tree. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to take out is any upward growing growth that's going straight up into the tree. That's really not going to help our training system at all, so that's going to go out. Last year when we trimmed this branch back to get some lateral growth, we had this branch come out, we had this branch go up, we had this branch produced, we had this branch produced, we had this smaller branch produced, and this branch produced, all which could have some fruit buds on them, but like I said, I doubt it this year. So that's one of the reasons why we do some trimming back. Now over here in the central part of the tree, we did a trim further up the branch, right about here. And as a result, we had all of this lateral branching all the way down. And that could produce some fruit as it grows. I'm not seeing much there. Most of the buds look pretty brown, but hey, what can I say? So we have that kind of branching all over the tree. Now we have to decide what's next. Now this branch right here is my chosen leader. This is what I call a modified central leader because the original leader wasn't strong enough, so we had to pick something that was fairly close to the middle of the tree to be the main framework from which our side branches are going to come from. And there are all kinds of buds along here and they look pretty dark. But anyway, the other thing is when we have a central leader system, we don't want any of the lateral or the surrounding branches to be more dominant. Like this one back here is higher than the actual leader. So this has to be trimmed down or this will become the dominant branch and your tree will be a little lopsided. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to trim back this leader, and by trimming back this leader up at the top, what I'm doing is removing the apical dominance and of this bud, and that will allow these side buds, whichever ones are alive, to start to grow. Now when I select the bud, I want to select a vegetative bud, which are the ones that are flat to the branch here. And also I would like to select the bud that's going to keep the leader growing toward the inside. So I don't want it going out that way toward the camera, but I want it more coming toward the interior portion of the tree. So I'm going to pick this one right here, and I'm going to cut it at a 45-degree angle with the highest point next to the bud, about 1/4 of an inch above the bud. So that would encourage more branching along the main stem. And one of the things that we should do when we're training is if we have large fruits like apples, we do not want them to develop along our leader because they can bend the leader over and ruin your attempt to train things. So the next thing I need to do is decide on how far to trim back these other branches that are more dominant. And I need to take some things out of the interior portion of the tree here, which is also close to competing with the height of the new leader. I'm going to trim this one back a little bit too because it's also now higher than the leader. And so I'm going to trim this one back about halfway. And I want these to be fairly even, so I'm going to trim this branch here roughly to the same height of the other one, as long as I can find a bud on the side that I'm looking for. This branch right here is growing toward the interior portion of the tree. I'd like to keep that open, so I'm going to remove this one. Now what I could have done, if this would have produced some fruit this year, I could have just left a little bit of a stub here, gotten some fruit here, and then taken it out next year, but I'm not going to do that. Now I have another one right here that's going right through the middle, but this is a fairly short branch and it has some flower buds on it, so I'm just going to reduce its length a little bit and hopefully get some fruit from that, but like I said, I don't hold out much hope this year. Now this branch is growing almost straight up, and this branch is moving in the same direction, so they would hit each other. And so I'm going to take this one out also. Now this one I can leave and see what it does this year, or I can trim it back. I think I'm just going to leave it for right now. I may come back to it in a few minutes and change my mind. Now the next decisions I'm going to make is trimming back all of these branches that have grown quite a bit over the last year. So this one is growing out in a direction that's not a bad direction, so I can just leave this one the way it is, as long as it's balanced in the tree. Now this one is going pretty much straight up, and that tends to be a tendency of this particular apricot, is it likes to grow straight up quite a bit. So I'm going to reduce this, and I'm going to cut it back to a branch that's going to hopefully direct the bud outward, out this way. I just have to decide how high up I want to be, and that depends on the direction that the bud will grow. For instance, this one will grow out this way, this one will grow out this way, this one will grow out this way, and it's just in the position of the bud on the branch that would tell me which way they'll grow if it's a viable bud. So I'm going to choose this one, and hopefully it'll be okay. There are no guarantees. Then I have to decide on this one. And I'm looking for a bud that's going to go the way I want it to go. I'm going to choose this one. I'm taking off quite a bit of growth here, but I want branching. And this is really a very healthy branch here. And again, I'm looking for a bud that I want. And normally I have to step back and look at the tree and see how it looks, and I may come back and do some more cutting. This one, I'm going to go back to about here. Now this branch here is kind of going off to what would be the southwest here, and I really don't want it growing that far over that way, but I'd like to keep it. So I'm going to try to select a bud that's going to run it in a different direction. And let's try, not a perfect bud over here, let's try this one right here. Now, as you look at these buds, this one is higher than this one, and I'd like to keep them somewhat even, so I may just take this bud down even a little bit more, but I'll come back. I like to go around the tree and look at it from different directions and see how the tree looks. So from this angle, I'm just going to wait. Now I'm on the western side of the tree. I have these three branches. This one's definitely got to come down because it's about as high as my leader, which I do not want. But I think I'll deal with these first. This one, I'm going to bring it out to the west. So I'm going to trim this one back to about, I'll go right here. Actually, that's a southern bud, but we'll see how many of the buds come out. Now, this is a really weird situation up here. Get a look at these branches. they're kind of weird and I don't really like that. So I'm going to trim that back. So what I'm going to choose is a bud going off to the northwest or again to the west. This one's going more toward the south. So I'm going to prune it kind of high because I don't know how many of these buds are alive. So I'm going to get in here, put my 45-degree angle and take that off. And then I have the one right behind it. So what happened when this was trimmed back to a bud that was right here, this bud did break and we had another bud develop and go straight up. Nothing much down here. So I would like more development there. So I'm going to try to trim this. Let's see where we're going to go. I'm going to trim it right to this bud, which would take it out in this direction and see what happens. So now this group of buds or group of branches and this group of branches over here, they are shorter than our leader. I have two more to deal with. I have this one, and these two to deal with yet. So what I'm going to do here, I'm on the south side of the tree now, and I'm going to trim it to, boy, these buds, I wish I knew which ones were going to come out. I really would rather not go this far back. This bud here is going to the inside. This bud here is going that way. I don't want it. This bud's going this way. So that's the best I'm going to be able to do. And then this branch, very healthy branch, more than 3 feet of growth. I'd like to, again, direct the growth out to the south. I don't want buds over here because they're going to grow in that direction. I don't want anything on this side that's going to grow in that direction. So I'm looking for something that's going to be along here. This is the closest thing. So we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm going to prune back to here. A bud, it'll take it to the south. This one I'm going to just trim back a little bit. That bud will go out to the east. This one's almost straight up, and I'm tempted to take it out altogether. But I'm going to leave, yeah, I'm really tempted to take it out altogether because it's so straight up. And that's what I'm going to do. Now, as I look at this tree, it's still a little out of balance to me, so I will bring this back a little bit. And these guys, when I looked at the tree from a different angle, these are still a little long for me, so I'm going to go back a little bit more. Well, not an ideal situation here. I guess I'll run it out this way. This is how the tree looks from the east. Now, again, we have some flower buds here, but this branch is a little close to this one, so I'm just going to trim it back a little bit. I wish I had a nice strong branch here. This one never developed into anything, so maybe later on some of these lower branches might be taken out. This is the tree from roughly from northeast, and this is the final angle of the tree from the west. So now we're finished with this tree for the third year of its pruning or training, whichever, it's both actually. But one of the things you have to remember is that I might do that slightly differently if I came back to the same tree the next day. I'd use the same basic principles, but I might make a cut a little longer, a little shorter. It depends on how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking about at the time. And remember, the only way you can get good at pruning and training is to do it. Sometimes the plants won't respond to the way that you pruned it the way you hope. Maybe a bud dies and then it produces a bud someplace you don't want it. and you just have to come and correct that the following season. But also you have to think about pruning and training as a way to make the plant look pleasing in the landscape. So that's something you develop an eye for over time. And in order to get good at it, like I said before, you just have to get out there and work on it. So I'll see you on for this particular video next year for its 4th year of pruning. And hopefully we'll be getting some fruit by then. Thanks for listening and watching, and I'll have a lot of other pruning videos coming up this spring. See you later.